I watched my daughter-in-law Madison slip white powder into my champagne glass, while everyone celebrated my announcement about donating $10 million to veterans' charities. Her reflection danced clearly in the crystal chandelier hanging above our heads at my 72nd birthday party. My son Brad was shaking hands with guests completely unaware of what his wife was doing. I remained perfectly still, pretending to study the birthday cards on the table, while Madison turned to whisper urgently to her friend Ashley. In one smooth motion, I switched our champagne glasses, then stepped back to join the crowd. Madison lifted the glass I'd just abandoned, toasting to my health, with a smile that would have fooled anyone who hadn't seen what I'd seen. 5 minutes later, her words began to slur. 3 weeks before that fateful party, I first noticed something was off about Madison during our regular Sunday dinner. She kept checking her phone, glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Back then, I dismissed it as work stress. How wrong I was. Let me back up 5 years to when Brad first brought Madison home. They'd met at a medical conference in Chicago, where Brad was presenting his research on pediatric cardiology. Madison worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative, specializing in cardiac medications. She was stunning with auburn hair that caught the light and green eyes that seemed to sparkle when she laughed. More than her beauty, though it was her warmth that won us over. "Call me Maddie," she'd said, taking my wife Eleanor's hands in both of hers. "Brad's told me so much about you both. I feel like I already know the family." Eleanor and I welcomed her with open arms. She seemed perfect for our eldest son, who'd been so focused on his career that we'd worried he'd never find someone. Madison attended every family gathering, remembered every birthday, and showed genuine interest in our stories. When she and Brad got engaged after 18 months of dating, Eleanor and I were thrilled. I spared no expense on their wedding at the Breakers in Palm Beach. 300 guests at 10-piece orchestra flowers flown in from Holland. Madison had kissed my cheek during the father-daughter dance, whispering, "Thank you for everything, Dad. I've never had a father like you." Those words would later haunt me. Madison proved to be an attentive daughter-in-law, especially after Eleanor was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 3 years into their marriage. She took time off work to drive Eleanor to chemotherapy appointments when Brad couldn't. She'd sit with my wife for hours, holding her hand, reading to her, making her laugh even on the darkest days. When Eleanor passed away 2 years ago, Madison was my rock. She handled funeral arrangements, fielded phone calls, made sure I ate. "We're your family, Dad," she'd say, rubbing my shoulder. "You'll never be alone." The changes started 6 months ago, right after I sold Data Vault Solutions. I'd built that company from nothing, starting in my garage in 1985 with just $5,000 and an idea about encrypted data storage. For 36 years, I poured my soul into growing it from a 2-person operation into a major player in cloud security. When Nextech Corporation offered $32 million for acquisition, I knew it was time. I was 71, tired, and ready to focus on what remained of my family. I told Brad and Madison about the sale over dinner at their house. Brad's eyes had widened at the number, but he'd immediately started talking about the good I could do with that money. Madison's reaction was different. She'd gone very still, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. "32 million, she'd repeated softly. "Before taxes," I'd clarified. "But yes, it's more money than I ever dreamed of having." That night, something shifted in Madison's eyes. I see it clearly now, looking back. The warmth flickered like a candle in the wind, replaced by something calculating. But grief has a way of clouding judgment, and I was still lost in the fog of losing Eleanor. The first real warning sign came when my home security system alerted me to movement in my office at 2 in the morning. I pulled up the feed on my phone expecting to see a malfunction or maybe a mouse. Instead, I watched Madison moving through my office with a small flashlight, her phone in her other hand. I lay in bed, heart pounding as she photographed documents on my desk. Financial statements, investment portfolios. Most disturbing of all, she lingered over my will, taking multiple photos of each page. The next morning she arrived with fresh bagels and coffee, all smiles and chatter about a new restaurant she wanted to try. I studied her face for any sign of guilt, but found only the familiar warmth I'd come to expect. Either I was losing my mind, or my daughter-in-law was an exceptional actress. I chose to investigate quietly. My years in tech had taught me the value of information and patience. I upgraded my security system, adding hidden cameras in my office, living room, and kitchen. What they revealed over the following weeks chilled me to the bone. Madison visited frequently while Brad was at the hospital, always with plausible reasons. Bringing groceries, checking on me, organizing Eleanor's remaining belongings. But the cameras showed a different story. She methodically searched my house, photographed mail, and made copies of keys. Most unsettling were the phone calls she made from my garden, always checking over her shoulder, speaking in hushed tones. "The old man trusts me completely," I heard her say during one call. "His 72nd birthday is next month. Everything changes after that." My blood ran cold. What exactly was supposed to change? I started paying closer attention to Madison's behavior. The loving daughter-in-law act continued in public, but now I noticed the subtle things. How she watched me when she thought I wasn't looking. How she encouraged me to have another drink at dinner, always topping off my glass. How she'd suddenly developed an interest in my health, asking about medications, doctor visits, and whether I'd updated my life insurance. Brad remained oblivious, and I couldn't blame him. Madison had perfected her role over 5 years. She knew exactly when to touch his arm, when to laugh at his jokes, when to express concern about his long hours. My son was exhausted from his demanding career and still grieving his mother. He had no reason to suspect the woman who'd stood by us through our darkest time. But I'd built a successful company by trusting my instincts, and every instinct now screamed danger. The woman I'd welcomed into our family, who'd held Eleanor's hand as she died, who called me Dad with such apparent affection, was planning something terrible. As my 72nd birthday approached, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront Madison directly or involve Brad without proof. Instead, I'd do what I'd always done in business: gather intelligence plans strategically, and wait for the perfect moment to act. Madison thought she was hunting an old, grieving widower. She had no idea she'd awakened the entrepreneur who'd outsmarted corporate giants and built an empire from nothing. The same patience and cunning that had made me millions would now protect what remained of my family. The game had begun, and Madison didn't even know we were playing. The morning I decided to hire a private investigator, Madison had just left after another of her caring visits. She'd brought homemade soup and fussed over me, claiming I looked tired. The soup went down the disposal as soon as her car left my driveway. I couldn't prove it was poisoned, but I wasn't taking chances. Marcus Thompson came highly recommended by my corporate lawyer, who'd used him for sensitive business matters. A former FBI agent specializing in financial crimes, Marcus had the kind of quiet intensity that made people nervous. He arrived at my house in an unremarkable sedan, wearing a simple gray suit that somehow made him invisible, despite his 6'3" frame. "Tell me everything," he said, settling into my office chair with a digital recorder. I laid out my suspicions, showed him the security footage, and shared my gut feeling that Madison was planning something sinister. Marcus listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes in precise handwriting. "You said she's interested in your will," he observed when I finished. "Have you made any recent changes?" Not since Eleanor passed. Everything goes to Brad and Daniel equally with a few charitable donations. Marcus studied me with sharp brown eyes. Mr. Joey, I need to ask some uncomfortable questions. Has Madison ever suggested you change your will, expressed concern about your health, encouraged any risky behaviors? I thought back over recent months. She's been oddly insistent about my taking vitamins she brings. Says they're specially formulated for seniors. And now that you mention it, she's brought up life insurance several times, wondering if I have enough coverage. Don't take any more of those vitamins, Marcus said firmly. I'll need a sample for testing. Now let me do some background work on Madison. Her maiden name. Wells, Madison Wells. But that turned out to be a lie like so much else about my daughter-in-law. Marcus called 3 days later with urgency in his voice. We need to meet immediately, not at your house. We met at a quiet coffee shop downtown. Marcus slid a thick folder across the table, his expression grim. Your daughter-in-law doesn't exist. Madison Wells is a fabrication. My coffee cup rattled against the saucer as I set it down. What do you mean? Her real name is Melissa Vaughn. She's 34 years old, originally from Baltimore. And Joey, she's done this before. The folder contained a horror story documented in police reports, court records, and death certificates. Melissa Vaughn and her sister Angela had been running elder fraud schemes for over a decade. Their method was chillingly consistent. Melissa would identify wealthy widowers through their adult children, create a false identity, integrate herself into the family, and slowly poison the target while appearing to be a devoted caregiver. 4 previous victims that we can confirm. Marcus explained, pointing to photographs of elderly men. Harold Morrison in Philadelphia, $90 million estate. Robert Patterson in Boston, $45 million. Eugene Davis in Baltimore, $60 million. Thomas Chen in New York, $78 million. Each man had died within 18 months of Melissa entering their lives. All from apparent natural causes, heart failure, stroke, kidney disease. All had changed their wills shortly before death, leaving substantial amounts to their beloved daughter-in-law, who'd cared for them so tenderly. The woman Madison calls her best friend Ashley. Marcus continued. That's Angela Vaughn, her sister and partner. She typically enters the picture later, helping establish the caring daughter-in-law narrative. They're professionals, Joey. This is their career. My hands trembled as I studied photos of Madison at each victim's funeral, the grieving daughter-in-law comforting family members she'd helped destroy. The same performance, the same tears, the same devastating results. How did she get away with it? I managed to ask. They're smart. They use pharmaceutical knowledge to mimic natural death in elderly people. Melissa actually did work in pharmaceutical sales, giving her access to drugs and understanding of how they interact. They space out their crimes, geographically use different identities, and always have rock-solid cover stories. Plus, grieving families rarely suspect the woman who spent months caring for their loved one. Marcus pulled out another document. Here's the kicker. I had the vitamins you gave me tested. They contain digitalis, a heart medication that's therapeutic in small doses, but causes gradual heart failure when accumulated. She's been poisoning you for months. The room spun. Those dizzy spells I'd attributed to grief. The fatigue that Madison so kindly helped me manage. The shortness of breath she'd insisted I see a doctor about. All orchestrated by the woman serving me poison with a smile. Based on the levels in these vitamins and your symptoms, she's been escalating the dose, Marcus explained. My contact at the lab says you're lucky. Another few weeks and you'd have had a fatal heart attack that no one would have questioned in a 72-year-old man. Rage burned through me, but I forced it down. Emotion would cloud judgment. and I needed clarity. What about Brad? Is he involved? Marcus shook his head. I found no evidence of your son's involvement. In fact, he pulled out prescription records. Brad's been receiving prescriptions for anxiety medication that he never authorized. The pharmacy shows Madison picking them up. She's likely drugging him too, keeping him compliant and foggy. That explained Brad's recent personality changes. My sharp, independent son had become increasingly dependent on Madison, deferring to her judgment, seeming perpetually exhausted. I'd attributed it to work stress and grief. Instead, his wife was chemically subduing him. The sisters have a specific timeline, Marcus continued. They never strike before establishing complete trust, usually waiting at least 3 years. But they also never wait too long, avoiding deep scrutiny from other family members. Your 72nd birthday fits their pattern perfectly. I stared at the evidence spread before me. Financial records showing Madison's hidden accounts. Communications between the sisters discussing my net worth. Photos of her meeting with a document forger who specialized in wills and insurance papers. The scope of their planning was breathtaking. She's going to kill me at my birthday party, I said quietly. Marcus nodded grimly. That's my assessment. Public setting lots of witnesses to her devotion emotional moment that could trigger a heart attack in an elderly man who just gave away millions to charity instead of family. She'll play the shocked, grieving daughter-in-law to perfection. Can we go to the police? With what we have, not enough for attempted murder. Elder fraud maybe, but the sisters are too careful. We need them to actually attempt the crime. Marcus leaned forward. But Joey, we can turn their plan against them. Are you willing to take a risk? I thought of Eleanor, how Madison had held her hand, while probably celebrating another victim's impending death. I thought of Brad, drugged and manipulated by a woman he loved. I thought of those 4 dead men and their grieving families. I'm 72 years old, I told Marcus. I've lived a good life, built something meaningful, loved, and been loved. If I can stop these monsters from hurting another family, I'll take any risk necessary. Marcus smiled for the first time since we'd met. Then let's discuss how to throw your daughter-in-law a birthday party she'll never forget. As we planned, I felt the cold clarity that had served me in business negotiations. Madison thought she was preying on a weak old man. She was about to learn that some old men had survived boardroom wars, hostile takeovers, and corporate espionage. I'd spent decades perfecting the art of patience strategy and the perfectly timed counterstrike. My birthday was 3 weeks away. Madison and Angela had been planning my death for months, maybe years. But I had something they didn't expect: knowledge of their plan resources to fight back, and the element of surprise. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and Melissa Vaughn had no idea the trap was already closing around her. The next morning, I sat across from my lawyer, Harold Fitzgerald, in his downtown office, maintaining the facade of routine estate planning. Harold had handled my affairs for 25 years, a detail Madison certainly knew from her snooping. What she didn't know was that I'd spotted her car in the parking garage, saw her shadow pass by the frosted glass of Harold's outer office as she tried to position herself to eavesdrop. I want to establish the charitable foundations before my birthday. I told Harold, keeping my voice at normal volume. The Veterans Fund, the Cancer Research Endowment, and something for elder fraud victims. Harold's eyebrows rose slightly at the last one, but he made notes without comment. We discussed structure and funding while I kept one eye on the shadow beyond the door. Then, as planned, I pulled out a folder. I've also been thinking about Brad and Madison's future, I said clearly. They've been so supportive. I want to make sure they're well taken care of. The shadow shifted, moving closer. I handed Harold carefully prepared documents, fake medical records, showing advanced liver disease, falsified investment statements, showing massive losses from bad trades and a draft will that left the bulk of my remaining estate to Brad and Madison. Every document was designed to make Madison believe her plan was working perfectly, that I was dying anyway, and that she stood to inherit even more than expected. $15 million to Brad and Madison, I said loud enough to carry. The rest to Daniel and the charities. Does that seem fair? We concluded our theatrical meeting, and I walked slowly to my car, adding a slight stagger to my step. In my rearview mirror, I caught Madison hurrying into the building, no doubt, to charm information out of Harold's secretary. Back home, I met with Dr. Patricia Coleman, the toxicologist Marcus had recommended. A small woman with silver hair and kind eyes, she examined me thoroughly before explaining exactly what Madison had been doing to my body. Digitalis poisoning is insidious, she explained, showing me test results. In small doses, it mimics natural aging and heart problems, fatigue, dizziness, shortness of breath, even visual disturbances. The victim often seeks medical help, but standard tests don't screen for it unless specifically requested. She provided me with activated charcoal pills that looked identical to my regular medications. Replace everything in your medicine cabinet with these. They'll neutralize any poison while appearing to be your normal pills. Also take these supplements to help your body recover from the months of poisoning. I followed her instructions meticulously, even as Madison continued her charade of concern. She visited more frequently as my birthday approached, always bringing those special vitamins, watching eagerly as I pretended to take them before palming them for later disposal. The hardest part was watching what she was doing to Brad. My son's transformation broke my heart. Once vibrant and sharp, he now moved through life in a fog, constantly tired, dependent on Madison for decisions he would have handled easily before. During family dinners, I watched her touch his water glass, his coffee cup, always positioning herself to add her poison without detection. I wanted to save him immediately, but Marcus counseled patience. If we tip our hand too early, the sisters will disappear. They have exit strategies, fake identities, ready money hidden offshore. We get one shot at this. So I documented everything. Hidden cameras throughout my house captured Madison's every move. I recorded her phone conversations using equipment Marcus provided. Most damning, I filmed her and Angela preparing what they called the final dose in my kitchen, while I pretended to nap in my study. 15 milligrams should do it. Madison measured carefully. His heart's already weak from the buildup. This much digitalis will trigger massive heart failure within minutes. In the chaos of the party with all that emotion about the charity announcements, no one will suspect anything. Angela watched nervously. You're sure about the timing? After the toast, when everyone's attention is on him. I'll be right beside him, the devoted daughter-in-law trying to save him. By the time the paramedics arrive, it'll be too late. They actually laughed, pleased with their plan. I sat in my study, fists clenched, forcing myself to remain still. Just a little longer, I told myself. Justice was coming. I reached out to the families of Madison's previous victims, working through Marcus to protect my identity initially. Each conversation shattered another piece of my heart. Harold Morrison's widow wept as she described how Madison had infiltrated their lives, becoming indispensable before Harold's sudden decline. Robert Patterson's son still blamed himself for not seeing the truth, tormented by how he'd defended Madison against other family members' suspicions. She was so kind, Eugene Davis's daughter told me. Even at the funeral, she held me while I cried. I thanked her for taking care of Dad. I actually thanked his killer. Each family provided evidence medical records showing similar symptoms, financial documents revealing mysterious transfers, photographs of Madison and Angela, at different phases of their cons. Marcus compiled everything into a case file that would eventually span 300 pages. Federal prosecutors got involved when we demonstrated the interstate nature of the crimes. Special Agent Jennifer Davis, a financial crimes specialist, took personal interest when she learned about the elder fraud angle. "These women are predators of the worst kind," she told me during a clandestine meeting. "They exploit trust, love, and grief. But prosecuting them requires catching them in the act. Are you willing to be bait?" I thought of Eleanor, of Brad's drugged confusion of 4 dead men, whose only crime was trusting a seemingly kind woman. "I'm willing." We planned my birthday party like a military operation. Every guest would be either law enforcement or a family member of previous victims. The catering staff, the bartenders, even the parking valets would be federal agents. Hidden cameras would record every angle, and Madison's fingerprints on the poison bottle would seal her fate. "What about Brad?" I asked Jennifer. "He's innocent in all this." "We've arranged for medical professionals to be present. The moment we arrest Madison, he'll receive immediate treatment for the drugs in his system. We'll protect him, Mr. Joey." 2 days before the party, I updated my real will with Harold, this time without Madison's knowledge. The charitable foundations were fully funded and irrevocable. I added a special provision: any family member convicted of attempting to harm me would forfeit all inheritance rights, with their portion going to elder fraud victims. Daniel flew in from Denver ostensibly for the birthday celebration, but actually as part of our plan. My younger son had always been suspicious of Madison, his military and detective training making him sensitive to deception. When I briefed him on the situation, his face went dark with rage. "I knew something was off," he growled. "The way she isolated Brad, how she always had excuses when I wanted to visit. I should have pushed harder." "You're here now," I told him. "That's what matters." The night before my party, I stood in my bedroom looking at Eleanor's photograph on my nightstand. "I'm going to stop her, Ellie," I whispered. "She won't hurt anyone else." I thought about the road that had led me here. 72 years of life, decades of business success, a loving marriage, 2 sons to be proud of. If it all ended tomorrow, at least I'd go down fighting for justice. But I didn't plan on dying. Madison and Angela had underestimated the old man they'd marked as their next victim. They saw wealth and weakness where they should have seen wisdom and patience. Tomorrow at my birthday party, they'd learn the difference. The silent wolf was ready to show his teeth. The morning of my 72nd birthday dawned clear and bright. One of those perfect California days that made the palm trees outside my window seem to sparkle. I lay in bed for a moment, feeling the weight of what was to come. Then I rose, took my real medications, and prepared to play the role of my life. Madison and Brad arrived early to help with party preparations. My daughter-in-law practically glowed with anticipation, her movements quick and excited. She kissed my cheek at the door, and it took everything in me not to recoil from her touch. "Happy birthday, Dad," she chirped. "How are you feeling? You look a little pale." "Just excited about the party," I replied, adding a slight tremor to my voice. "It's not every day a man turns 72. She squeezed my arm with false concern. "Well, don't overdo it. We want you around for many more birthdays." The irony of her words would have been laughable if it weren't so sinister. I watched through my study's hidden camera as Madison and Angela prepared their lethal cocktail in my kitchen. They'd arrived early, claiming to help with food preparation, sending Brad on an invented errand to the wine store. Alone in what they believed was an empty house, they worked with practiced efficiency. Madison produced a small vial from her purse, holding it up to the light. The clear liquid inside looked harmless as water. 15 milligrams of digitalis, she confirmed to her sister. Dissolved in champagne, it's completely undetectable. Angela kept watch while Madison used a small syringe to measure the exact dose. "You're sure about the champagne? What if he doesn't drink it?" "He always toasts with champagne at family events. I've made sure of it for 5 years." Madison's voice carried the confidence of a seasoned predator. "Besides, I'll be the one handing him the glass. He trusts me completely." They tested the mixture, adding it to champagne and watching it dissolve without trace. Madison even tasted a drop, confident in her pharmaceutical knowledge. Perfect. No taste, no odor, no visible change. In about 3 minutes, he'll feel faint. 5 minutes, cardiac arrhythmia. 7 minutes, complete heart failure. The excitement of the party and his announcement will provide perfect cover. "What about after?" Angela asked nervously. Madison smiled, and I saw the real woman beneath the mask for the first time. Cold, calculating, utterly without conscience. "I'll be the devoted daughter-in-law trying desperately to save him. Brad's too drugged to think clearly, and Daniel's always been suspicious of me anyway. His hostility will actually help making him look guilty if anyone suspects foul play." They cleaned up meticulously, leaving no trace of their preparation. Madison slipped the prepared vial back into her purse, patting it like a talisman. Then they transformed back into helpful family members as Brad returned with the wine. I emerged from my study playing the grateful patriarch. "Thank you all for helping. Eleanor would have loved seeing the family together like this." Madison hugged me, and I felt the vial in her purse press against my side. "She's here in spirit, Dad. Today's going to be perfect." By afternoon, guests began arriving for the evening party. What Madison didn't know was that every single person walking through my door was part of our operation. FBI agents posing as old business colleagues, federal marshals dressed as neighbors, the families of Madison's previous victims playing friends from the country club. Even the catering staff and bartenders were law enforcement. My real friends and extended family had been told I was postponing the party due to health concerns. We couldn't risk innocent bystanders when Madison made her move. Daniel arrived with his family from Denver, playing his part perfectly. He greeted Madison coolly, maintaining the suspicious brother-in-law persona she expected. His wife Ruth, actually an undercover federal agent, chatted warmly with other guests while keeping Madison in her peripheral vision. Uncle Joey. A young woman embraced me warmly. Behind Madison's back, Agent Sarah Coleman whispered, "Cameras are all active. We're recording everything." The house filled with laughter and conversation, a perfectly normal birthday party to any observer. Madison circulated like the perfect hostess, ensuring everyone had drinks, making small talk, playing the devoted daughter-in-law to perfection. Several guests complimented Brad on his wonderful wife, and I watched him smile with drugged contentment, unaware of the viper in his bed. Around 7 o'clock, I called everyone to attention. My heart raced, but not from Madison's poison. This was the moment of truth. "Thank you all for coming." I began standing near the bar where Madison had positioned herself with the champagne. Turning 72 has made me reflect on what really matters in life. Eleanor's death taught me that money means nothing compared to the good we can do with it. I saw Madison's hand move to her purse, her fingers finding the vial. That's why I'm announcing tonight the creation of 3 foundations. I paused for effect, watching Madison's face. $10 million will go to veterans' charities honoring those who served our country. $5 million will fund cancer research in Eleanor's memory, and $10 million will establish a foundation for victims of elder fraud. Madison's smile flickered. $25 million gone from what she'd expected to inherit. But she recovered quickly, applauding with the rest. What she didn't know was that the remaining $7 million had also been placed in protected trusts, untouchable by anyone with a criminal record. "A toast!" Brad called out, still playing the proud son. "To Dad, who continues to amaze us all. Madison moved smoothly, collecting champagne glasses from the bar. I watched in the mirror behind the bottles as she deftly added the contents of her vial to one specific glass. Her movements were practiced professional. How many times had she done this before? She approached me with 2 glasses, one in each hand. "The birthday boy should have the first toast," she said warmly, offering me the poisoned glass with her right hand. "Actually," Daniel stepped forward. "I'd like to say something first." He launched into a birthday speech, drawing everyone's attention. It was the distraction I needed. I set down the poisoned glass to embrace my son, then picked up Madison's glass instead. When I turned back, I made sure to hold the safe glass while gesturing emotionally. Madison focused on Daniel's speech, and confident in her plan, didn't notice the switch. "To family," I said when Daniel finished raising my glass. "To those we've lost and those still with us. To justice and truth." We drank. I sipped carefully from Madison's safe glass, while she caught up in maintaining her performance, took a healthy swallow from the poisoned champagne. I watched her throat move as she swallowed her own deadly cocktail. The conversation resumed, but I kept my eyes on Madison. 1 minute passed, then 2. At 3 minutes, I saw the first sign, a slight flush creeping up her neck. She touched her throat absently, then shook her head as if clearing it. 4 minutes. Her hand trembled as she set down her glass. She blinked rapidly, probably experiencing the visual disturbances Dr. Coleman had described. I saw the moment confusion shifted to alarm in her eyes. 5 minutes. Madison gripped the edge of the bar, her knuckles white. Sweat beaded on her forehead. She looked at the champagne glass in horror, then at me. Our eyes met across the room, and for the first time since I'd known her, I didn't pretend. I let her see the knowledge in my gaze, the calculated patience of a man who'd waited for exactly this moment. Madison. Brad moved toward his wife with concern. "Are you all right?" She tried to speak, but her words came out slurred. Something's wrong. The champagne." 6 minutes. Her legs buckled. She would have fallen if Agent Coleman, positioned nearby as a party guest, hadn't caught her. But instead of helping her to a chair, Coleman efficiently guided her to the floor, checking her pulse with professional detachment. "She's having some kind of attack," Coleman announced. "Someone call 911. Multiple guests produced phones, though the calls they made were to confirm the operation was proceeding as planned. Madison writhed on the floor, experiencing every symptom she'd planned for me. Poetic justice in its purest form. 7 minutes. But Madison didn't die. We weren't killers like her. Dr. Coleman had calculated the dose carefully enough to incapacitate and demonstrate what she'd planned for me, but not enough to kill. Madison would live to face justice. "The champagne!" Madison gasped, her eyes wild as she stared at me. You switched them." "Switched what, Maddie?" I asked innocently, kneeling beside her with manufactured concern. "What are you talking about?" Understanding dawned in her poisoned gaze. She'd been played by the old man she'd dismissed as an easy mark. But the real shock was yet to come. "FBI nobody move?" The room erupted as federal agents dropped their covers. Guests produced badges and weapons. The kindly old businessman who'd been chatting about golf revealed himself as Special Agent Martin Cross. The neighbor lady discussing her grandchildren was Deputy Marshal Helen Wright. Jennifer Davis stepped forward, her federal prosecutor's badge gleaming. "Melissa Vaughn, you're under arrest for attempted murder, elder fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit murder across state lines." Madison's eyes rolled back as the digitalis reached its peak effect. Paramedics rushed in, real ones this time, administering the antidote we'd prepared. We wanted her conscious for what came next. As they stabilized her, I stood over the woman who'd planned my death. "By the way, Melissa," I used her real name deliberately. "Happy birthday to me." Madison's recovery happened in stages, each one revealing more of her horror as she grasped the completeness of her downfall. The paramedics administered the digitalis antidote, and within minutes, her vision cleared enough to take in the transformed scene around her. FBI agents had dropped all pretense, their weapons and badges now visible. The birthday party had become a crime scene. "Brad!" she gasped, reaching for my son with trembling fingers. "Brad, help me. Your father, he tried to poison me." Brad stood frozen, his drugged mind struggling to process the chaos. Agent Coleman gently moved him aside. "Mr. Brad, we need to examine you as well. You've been exposed to unauthorized substances." "What?" Brad's confusion deepened. "What are you talking about?" Marcus Thompson stepped forward, no longer the anonymous guest, but clearly the investigating private detective. "Your wife has been drugging you with benzodiazepines for months, Mr. Brad. It's why you felt so foggy and dependent lately." As Madison struggled against the soft restraints the paramedics had applied, Ashley tried to edge toward the door. Her escape attempt lasted exactly 3 seconds before Catherine Walsh, who'd been posing as my new housekeeper, intercepted her with practiced efficiency. "Angela Vaughn," Catherine announced, producing handcuffs. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, elder fraud, and identity theft." The sisters' eyes met across the room, their elaborate scheme crumbling around them. Ashley began to cry, the tears of a criminal caught, rather than genuine remorse. Madison, however, had recovered enough to attempt damage control. "This is insane," she protested, her voice stronger now. "I'm being framed. Joey's gone senile. He's paranoid. He's—" "Save it," Jennifer Davis interrupted. She nodded to one of the agents who wheeled in a large screen. "We have something to show everyone." The screen flickered to life, displaying crystal-clear footage from my kitchen security camera. The entire party watched in stunned silence as Madison and Angela prepared the digitalis, their conversation about dosages and timing audible in damning detail. 15 milligrams should do it." Madison's recorded voice filled the room. "His heart's already weak from the buildup. This much digitalis will trigger massive heart failure within minutes." Brad made a sound like a wounded animal. The fog of drugs couldn't protect him from the brutal clarity of watching his wife plan his father's murder. He staggered backward, Daniel catching him before he fell. "There's more," Jennifer announced grimly. The screen shifted to show Madison in my office at 2 a.m. photographing my will. Then her phone conversations in the garden discussing my net worth with Angela. The vial of poison being slipped into her purse. Her practiced movements as she poisoned the champagne glass, believing herself unobserved. But the most damaging evidence was yet to come. Jennifer produced Madison's purse, handling it with gloved hands. "Ms. Vaughn, would you like to explain why you're carrying a vial of concentrated digitalis?" "That's not mine," Madison protested. "Someone planted it with your fingerprints all over it." Jennifer pulled out an evidence bag containing the vial and matching the batch number from a theft at Philadelphia General Hospital 3 weeks ago. Madison's face went white. That particular detail hadn't been part of her plan. She didn't know we'd traced her pharmaceutical connections that far. Daniel stepped forward, his detective's shield now visible. "I've been working with federal authorities for months, Madison. Or should I say Melissa?" He turned to address the room. "My suspicion started when Madison tried to isolate Brad from the family. Classic predator behavior. You were always against me. Madison snarled, dropping her loving daughter-in-law mask entirely. Jealous of Brad's success, jealous that Joey loved me more than... Actually... I interrupted my voice, carrying the authority of decades in boardrooms. I never loved you at all. I tolerated you for Brad's sake. But when you held Eleanor's hand as she died, were you calculating how long until you could kill me too? The question hung in the air like a blade. Madison's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. Behind her mask of shock, I saw the calculating mind that had planned so many deaths spinning frantically looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Marcus approached Jennifer with a thick folder. Ma'am, I have here documented evidence linking Ms. Vaughn to 4 previous elder deaths: Harold Morrison, Robert Patterson, Eugene Davis, and Thomas Chen. All died from similar symptoms after Ms. Vaughn integrated herself into their families. That's circumstantial, Madison found her voice. You can't prove. Actually, we can. A new voice joined the conversation. The crowd parted to reveal a dignified woman in her 60s, her silver hair perfectly styled, despite the tears on her cheeks. Madison's face lost all remaining color. Helen Morrison stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Madison with burning intensity. You remember me, Melissa Harold's widow, the woman you comforted at his funeral after you murdered him. I didn't. Harold had heart problems. Madison's protest sounded weak even to her own ears. He did after you gave him those special vitamins, Helen said coldly. Just like Joey. We exhumed Harold's body last month. Would you like to know what the new toxicology report found? Madison didn't answer. She couldn't. The weight of her crimes was crushing her carefully constructed world. More people stepped forward. James Patterson, Jr., whose father died mysteriously after Madison entered their lives. Eugene Davis's daughter, still haunted by her father's sudden decline. Thomas Chen's widow, holding a photograph of the grandmother Madison, had pretended to befriend while poisoning him. We invited them all, I explained to the stunned room. Every family Madison and Angela destroyed. They deserved to see justice done. Ashley broke completely, sobbing hysterically as the victims' families stared at her. It was all Melissa's idea, she wailed. She made me help. I never wanted... Shut up, Madison hissed at her sister, but the damage was done. Jennifer Davis allowed herself a small smile. Angela Vaughn, would you like to make a statement? I remind you that everything you say can be used against you in court. The sisters turned on each other, then their criminal partnership dissolving into mutual accusations. Ashley blamed Madison for planning everything, while Madison accused Ashley of being weak and sloppy. The federal agents recorded every word. Throughout this drama, Brad sat in a chair, head in his hands, his world shattered. Dr. Coleman knelt beside him, explaining how the drugs in his system had affected his judgment and perception. None of this is your fault, she assured him. You were a victim too. How did I not see it? Brad's voice broke. How could I love someone capable of this? I placed my hand on my son's shoulder. Because she was a master manipulator. She fooled all of us for years. The woman you loved never existed. Madison must have heard me because she laughed a bitter sound devoid of her usual warmth. Oh, I existed, Joey. Every moment of care, every gesture of love, all calculated to get what I deserved. Do you know how exhausting it was pretending to care about your boring stories and Eleanor's endless illness? That confession sealed her fate more than any evidence could. The mask had finally dropped, completely revealing the monster beneath. Even Angela looked shocked by her sister's callousness. Jennifer Davis signaled to her team. Get them out of here. Separate vehicles, separate facilities, and make sure Ms. Madison Vaughn receives immediate medical attention. We want her healthy for trial." As the agents prepared to remove the sisters, Madison made one last desperate play. "Joey poisoned me," she screamed. "He switched the glasses. He tried to kill me. I demand charges be filed." Jennifer regarded her with professional detachment. "Mr. Joey will face no charges. He acted in self-defense using your own weapon against you. The dose you prepared the glass, you poisoned your fingerprints on everything. You convicted yourself." They dragged Madison out, then her screams of rage echoing through my house. Angela followed more quietly, her sobs the only sound. The birthday party from hell had reached its climax. But we weren't done yet. There was still Brad to heal evidence to process, and a final revelation that would ensure the sisters never harmed another family again. As the federal agents began processing the scene, I looked around at the victims' families. My son's shattered expression, the evidence of Madison's crimes displayed on screens and tables. The reversal was complete. The hunter had become the hunted, caught in her own trap. Yet seeing Madison's downfall brought me no joy, only grim satisfaction. Justice had been served, but at what cost to my family? That was a question only time could answer. As the paramedics wheeled Madison out on a gurney, still screaming about being framed, more families began to arrive. Jennifer Davis had coordinated perfectly, timing their entrance for maximum impact. These weren't party guests or federal agents, but the ghosts of Madison's past crimes made flesh. Helen Morrison led the group, her dignified bearing masking years of grief. Behind her came James Patterson, Jr., a tall man whose father's death had nearly destroyed him. Eugene Davis's daughter Margaret clutched a leather folder, her knuckles white with tension. Thomas Chen's widow, Lynn, held her adult son's arm for support. "Is she gone?" Margaret asked, her voice trembling. "Being transported to federal custody," Jennifer confirmed. "But we'd like you all to stay. Your testimonies are crucial." Brad looked up from his chair, still struggling with the benzodiazepine fog. "How many?" he asked hoarsely. "How many people did she kill?" Marcus Thompson opened his investigation file. 4 confirmed elderly victims over 12 years. We suspect there may be more. The sisters were careful spacing their crimes across different states using different identities. "Tell him," Helen Morrison stepped forward. "He deserves to know what kind of monster he married." What followed was a symphony of grief and revelation. Each family shared their story, painting a picture of calculated evil that left even the hardened federal agents looking disturbed. Helen went first. Harold was 81, still sharp as a tack. He'd built Morrison Industries from nothing, loved to tell stories about the early days. Then Madison appeared, calling herself Melody Winters. She was dating Harold's grandson, Kyle, just like she later dated Brad. The parallels were chilling. Madison had refined her approach over time, but kept the same basic pattern. She was so helpful when Harold's health started declining. Helen continued, always there with his medications, driving him to appointments, making sure he ate properly. We were grateful. We thanked her for her dedication. "The vitamins," Thomas Chen's widow added quietly. "Always special vitamins." She said they were formulated specifically for elderly hearts. Thomas took them religiously because sweet Miranda Chen seemed so concerned about his health. Margaret Davis opened her folder, spreading photographs across my dining table. My father documented everything in his final months. Look at his handwriting deteriorating, his notes becoming confused. He knew something was wrong, but couldn't figure out what. Madison had convinced everyone he was developing dementia. The photos told a heartbreaking story. A vibrant man's decline documented in shaking handwriting, desperate notes about feeling poisoned, dismissed as paranoid delusions. Madison had gaslit him while slowly increasing the digitalis dose. She killed him 2 days after he changed his will, Margaret said flatly. Left her $3 million for her devoted care. The girlfriend who'd only been in our lives 18 months walked away rich while we buried our father. Brad made a retching sound and stumbled toward the bathroom. Daniel followed to help his brother. The sound of violent illness carried back to us Brad's body rejecting not just the drugs, but the horrific reality of his marriage. Catherine Walsh. The undercover agent who'd posed as my housekeeper approached with an evidence box. We searched Madison's car while she was being transported. You all need to see this. Inside were trophies. Madison had kept souvenirs from each victim: Harold Morrison's pocket watch, Robert Patterson's wedding ring, Eugene Davis's favorite pen, Thomas Chen's military medals. Each item carefully labeled with dates and amounts inherited. She kept score, Jennifer observed with disgust. Like a serial killer keeping trophies. But worse was the notebook Catherine produced next. Madison's handwriting filled pages with observations about potential victims. Names, net worth, family dynamics, medical conditions. My name appeared 18 months ago with chilling notes. Joseph Joey Miller, $30+ million tech fortune. Wife Eleanor, terminal cancer. Son Brad, pediatric cardiologist, overworked and lonely. Establish relationship through Brad. Timeline 3 to 5 years. Challenge younger son Daniel in law enforcement. Maintain distance. She'd planned everything. Our meeting wasn't chance. She'd stalked Brad at medical conferences until she found the perfect opportunity. Every moment of our relationship had been choreographed. There are 12 more names in here, Catherine reported. Elderly men she was researching for future cons. We've contacted authorities in their areas to warn them. Ashley, now in custody, had broken completely and was talking to federal agents via video link. Her confession played on Jennifer's laptop, the woman sobbing as she detailed their crimes. It started when we were young. Ashley wept. Our grandmother left everything to charity instead of us. Melissa said we deserved compensation for taking care of her. The first time was supposed to be just once, just enough to get by. But Melissa liked it. She liked the control, the planning, outsmarting everyone. Did you participate in the murders? The interviewing agent asked. I helped with the research, found the targets. But Melissa handled the medications. She had the pharmaceutical knowledge. She said it was merciful that they were old anyway, that we were just accelerating nature. Brad returned, supported by Daniel, in time to hear this justification. Merciful, he said, his voice raw. She watched them suffer. She held their hands while poisoning them and called it mercy. The investigation's scope kept expanding. Federal agents discovered offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands holding millions stolen from victims. Properties purchased under shell companies. A storage unit in Delaware filled with more trophies and detailed records of their crimes. She never destroyed anything, Marcus observed. Her arrogance was absolute. She believed she'd never be caught. Dr. Coleman arrived with Brad's test results. The level of benzodiazepines in your system is significant, but not life-threatening. However, you'll need supervised withdrawal. Madison was essentially keeping you in a controlled state of sedation. For how long? Brad asked. Based on the accumulation, at least 8 months, since right after your father sold his company. The timeline clicked into place. Madison had started drugging Brad the moment she learned about my wealth, ensuring he'd be too compliant to interfere with her plans. Every concerned comment about his fatigue, every suggestion he take time off work had been manipulation. I need to contact my patients, Brad said suddenly. If I've been impaired for months. Your hospital has been notified, Daniel assured him. They're reviewing your cases, but initial assessment shows your work remained competent. You fought through the fog professionally, even when you couldn't personally. Small comfort, but Brad clung to it. At least Madison hadn't destroyed his career along with everything else. As evening deepened into night, the full weight of Madison's crimes became clear. Financial forensics revealed she and Angela had stolen over $20 million through their elderly victim scheme. 4 men-dead families destroyed countless lives affected by their greed. "We have enough for multiple life sentences," Jennifer announced. "Murder, attempted murder, elder fraud, identity theft, conspiracy across state lines. They'll never see freedom again." But Madison had one more card to play. From her hospital bed under guard, but not yet formally processed, she made a phone call that would backfire spectacularly. "She's claiming immunity." Jennifer's phone buzzed with the news. "Says she has information about a larger elder fraud ring, wants to make a deal." I laughed bitterly. "Let me guess. She'll throw Angela under the bus, claim she was forced to participate, try to reduce her sentence." "Exactly. But here's the thing. We've been investigating that ring for 2 years. Madison and Angela were independent operators who occasionally bought information from them. She has nothing we need." The files Catherine found in Madison's car confirmed this. She'd purchased victim lists and pharmaceutical connections from a larger criminal organization, but wasn't integral to their operations. Her attempt at leverage crumbled like everything else she'd built on lies. As midnight approached on my 72nd birthday, the party guests began to leave. But these weren't normal farewells. Each victim's family member stopped to shake my hand, thank me for stopping Madison, and share a moment of understanding that only those who'd been deceived so thoroughly could comprehend. "You saved other families from this pain," Helen Morrison said, squeezing my hands. "Harold would be glad to know she was finally stopped." Margaret Davis hugged me tightly. "You gave us closure and hope that justice still exists." When they'd all gone, only family and key investigators remained. Brad sat on my couch, staring at nothing, the full horror of his marriage settling into his bones. Daniel sat beside him, steady and protective as always. "What happens now?" Brad asked no one in particular. Jennifer Davis gathered her files. "Now we build an airtight case. Madison and Angela will face trial within 6 months. With the evidence we have, and Ashley's confession conviction is certain. You'll need to testify, Brad. Are you prepared for that?" My son straightened, something of his old strength showing through. "I'll do whatever it takes. She won't hurt anyone else." As the investigators left, promising to keep us updated, I found myself alone with my sons for the first time all evening. The birthday party decorations looked garish now, mocking reminders of Madison's planned celebration over my corpse. "I'm sorry," Brad whispered. "I brought her into our lives. If I'd been more careful, if I'd seen through her." "Stop," I commanded gently. "She fooled everyone for over a decade. You were targeted because of your good heart, not despite it. The shame is hers alone." Daniel nodded agreement. "We're family. We'll get through this together. And Brad, you're going to need help processing this. No shame in therapy, brother. I'll go with you if you want." As my sons embraced, I felt Eleanor's presence strongly. She would have been heartbroken by Madison's betrayal, but proud of how we'd handled it. Justice had been served, but healing would take much longer. My 72nd birthday had become a day of reckoning. The woman who'd planned to kill me with champagne and false tears was heading for a federal prison cell. Her victims had found voice and validation, and my family, though wounded, remained standing. The complete unraveling of Madison's crimes would continue for months, as investigators traced every thread of her deceptions. But the most important work, rebuilding trust, healing from betrayal, learning to move forward, that began now. 6 months later, I stood at a podium in the conference room of the Joseph Miller Foundation for Elder Protection, looking out at 50 faces marked by loss, but lifted by purpose. The November rain outside seemed appropriate, washing the world clean as we worked to do the same for other families. Welcome to our third monthly meeting. I began my voice steady and clear. When we started this support group, I wondered if anyone would come. Now look at us. The room held victims' families, social workers, law enforcement officers, and elderly people who'd narrowly escaped similar schemes. Brad sat in the front row, clear-eyed and present in a way he hadn't been for over a year. The benzodiazepine withdrawal had been brutal, but he'd emerged stronger and more determined than ever. Madison and Angela's trial had concluded 2 weeks ago. Both sisters received life sentences without possibility of parole. The judge calling their crimes unconscionable betrayals of the most sacred trusts. Madison had maintained her innocence until the end, but the jury deliberated for only 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Today I want to talk about the warning signs we missed. I continued clicking to a presentation Brad and I had developed together. Not to blame ourselves, but to help others recognize these predators before it's too late. The Foundation had already made significant impacts. Working with federal authorities, we'd developed an early warning system that flagged suspicious patterns around elderly care. 3 potential victims had been saved in the last month alone, when family members recognized the signs we'd publicized. Margaret Davis raised her hand. Joey, can you talk about the pharmaceutical angle again? I think that's crucial for people to understand. I nodded, clicking to a slide showing common drugs used in elder fraud. Madison's expertise was digitalis, but we've discovered other common methods. Sedatives to create confusion, blood thinners to cause accidents, insulin in non-diabetics. Always question new medications or supplements, especially if they come from the caregiver rather than a doctor. Dr. Patricia Coleman, who'd become our medical advisor, added technical details about how families could request toxicology screening if they suspected poisoning. We'd lobbied successfully to make such testing covered by Medicare when elder abuse was suspected. The most important thing, Brad stood to address the group, his voice carrying hard-won wisdom, is to trust your instincts. I ignored so many red flags because Madison seemed perfect. Too perfect. If someone integrates into your family unusually fast, if they isolate the elderly person from others, if they show excessive interest in finances, pay attention. Helen Morrison, who'd become our co-director, shared updates on legislation we were pushing. The Madison-Miller Act passed the House last week, she announced to applause. It would create a national database of elder fraud convictions and require background checks for anyone with fiduciary access to elderly clients. We'd named it after Madison, deliberately ensuring her name would forever be associated with protecting victims rather than creating them. It seemed fitting justice. Daniel entered the room with a guest, and my heart lifted. Margaret Chen, the widow I'd met at our first meeting, smiled warmly as she took a seat. We'd been having coffee twice a week, finding comfort in shared experiences, and gradually building something that might become more. Eleanor would have approved, I think. She never wanted me to be alone. Before we break into small groups, I announced, I want to share some success stories. I told them about Robert Williams, 78, whose daughter recognized Madison-like behavior in his new home health aide, thanks to our awareness campaign. About Dorothy Anderson, whose son discovered his stepmother's elder fraud scheme after attending one of our seminars. About the 3 nursing homes that had implemented our verification protocols and caught 2 attempted frauds. Every person we save honors those we lost, I concluded. Harold Morrison, Robert Patterson, Eugene Davis, Thomas Chen, and all the unknown victims. They didn't die in vain if we can prevent others from suffering the same fate. As the meeting progressed, I watched Brad facilitate a group for adult children of victims. He'd returned to medicine with renewed purpose, specializing now in geriatric care and elder abuse recognition. His experience with Madison had transformed from shame into expertise that helped others. During the break, Marcus Thompson pulled me aside. He'd officially joined our foundation as head of investigations. "Joey, we've had a development. Remember the larger fraud ring? Madison bought information from the FBI, used her records to track them down. 17 arrests yesterday, including 2 doctors and a pharmaceutical distributor. The ripple effects of stopping Madison continued to spread. Her meticulous record-keeping born of arrogance had become a roadmap for dismantling an entire network of elder predators. There's something else," Marcus continued. "One of Brad's patients, Mrs. Elkins, her grandson, just called our hotline. He thinks his girlfriend might be another Madison. We're investigating." The work never ended, but each save made it worthwhile. We'd turned my near-death experience into a lifeline for others. As the meeting concluded, families exchanged numbers and hugs. The shared trauma had created unexpected bonds. Helen Morrison's daughter was dating Eugene Davis's son. 2 widowers had become fishing buddies. Pain had birthed community. Brad approached as I gathered my materials. "Dad, I've been thinking about Mom lately. What she'd think of all this." "She'd be proud," I said simply. "She always believed in turning pain into purpose, and she'd be especially proud of you, son. You've shown incredible strength." "I had a good example," Brad replied, then surprised me with a hug. We weren't typically demonstrative, but Madison's betrayal had taught us not to take family for granted. That evening, the family gathered for dinner at my house, a new tradition we'd established. Daniel and Ruth brought their kids, who filled the space with laughter. Brad came with Sarah, a fellow doctor he'd started dating cautiously. Margaret Chen joined us, fitting naturally into our reformed family dynamic. As we sat around the table, Eleanor had chosen 30 years ago, I raised my glass of water. None of us felt comfortable with champagne anymore. To family, I toasted. Both blood and chosen. To justice served and lives saved. To second chances. To Dad, Daniel added, who taught us that wisdom is the greatest weapon against those who mistake kindness for weakness. We drank, and I felt a sense of completion. Madison had intended to destroy our family for money. Instead, she'd made us stronger and given us a mission that transcended our personal pain. Later, as Margaret helped me clear dishes, she asked quietly, "Do you ever regret not just going to the police immediately?" I considered the question. If I had, she might have escaped. Disappeared to prey on another family. By playing the long game, we ensured she'll never hurt anyone again. So no regrets. "You're a remarkable man, Joey Miller," she said softly. "Just a stubborn old fool who got lucky," I replied, but I squeezed her hand in gratitude. As the evening wound down, Brad pulled me aside. "I've been thinking about the foundation. I want to do more. What if we established a medical clinic specifically for elderly victims? Free testing, counseling, a safe space to report suspicions." "Tell me more," I encouraged, and we spent an hour planning what would become the Eleanor Miller Memorial Clinic, opening 6 months later. My 73rd birthday approached with none of the fanfare of the previous year. Just family, real friends, and the quiet satisfaction of work well done. The foundation had helped 43 families in its first year. The Madison Miller Act had passed into law. Elder fraud prosecutions had increased by 30% nationwide. Madison herself had become a cautionary tale Her story featured in documentaries and true crime podcasts. She'd wanted fame and fortune. She'd achieved the former in the worst possible way. Prison reports indicated she spent her days in solitary confinement, her fellow inmates having little sympathy for someone who'd preyed on the elderly. Angela had broken completely, developing severe depression and requiring constant psychiatric care. The sister who'd helped destroy so many families had destroyed herself through guilt. There was justice in that, though I took no pleasure from it. As I prepared for bed on the night before my 73rd birthday, I found myself at Eleanor's photograph again. "We did it, Ellie," I whispered. "We stopped her and saved others. Madison thought she was stealing our legacy, but instead, she helped us create one that matters." The next morning, I woke not to plans of poison and betrayal, but to my granddaughter's voice on the phone, singing, "Happy Birthday," off-key. Daniel's family was coming for breakfast. Brad was bringing Sarah to meet everyone properly. Margaret had promised her famous coffee cake. Life had moved on, scarred, but not broken. Madison had taught us all valuable lessons about trust, vigilance, and the importance of protecting our vulnerable loved ones. Her legacy wasn't the wealth she'd tried to steal, but the awareness she'd inadvertently created. The Foundation's motto, displayed prominently in our offices, said it all. From betrayal comes vigilance. From loss comes purpose. From pain comes protection for others. As I dressed for the day, I noticed my reflection looked younger somehow. Not physically. I was still a 73-year-old man with all the wear that implied. But there was a vitality in my eyes that had been missing since Eleanor's death. Purpose had a way of revitalizing even the oldest hearts. The doorbell rang, and I heard my family's voices filling the house with warmth. Real warmth, not the calculated performance Madison had orchestrated. I took one last look at Eleanor's photo, straightened my shoulders, and went to embrace the life that had emerged from near death. Madison had thought me weak, an easy mark for her practiced deceptions. She'd learned too late that some old wolves just look tired. When threatened, when our families are at stake, we remember exactly who we are and what we're capable of. My name is Joey Miller. I'm 73 years old, a widower, a father, a grandfather, and a survivor. I built a tech empire from nothing, raised 2 good sons, loved a wonderful woman for 40 years, and when a predator came for my family, I fought back with everything I had. Now I spend my remaining years making sure other families don't suffer what mine did. It's not the retirement I'd planned, but it's the one that matters. Every day we save someone's father, grandfather, or uncle from a Madison or Angela. Every day we prove that evil thrives only when good people don't know what to watch for. If you're reading this because you suspect someone in your family is being targeted, trust your instincts. Call our hotline. Attend our meetings. Don't let politeness or uncertainty stop you from protecting your loved ones. Madison counted on our good manners and trust. Don't give predators that advantage. And if you're reading this because you've already lost someone to elder fraud, know that you're not alone. Their loss matters. Their story can save others. Join us in turning grief into action, loss into purpose. Thank you for listening to my story. Like and subscribe if you found value in it. Share it with anyone who has elderly loved ones. Awareness is our best defense. And please comment below with your own experiences or questions. Every shared story strengthens our community and helps protect vulnerable seniors. Remember, love your elders, protect them fiercely, and never mistake their kindness for weakness. Some of us old wolves have plenty of bite left. Until next time, stay vigilant and keep your families close. This is Joey Miller signing off with hope for a future where no Madison can ever again destroy a family for greed.